This week, a hot new bombshell enters the villa.
I'm Shania. I'm a content creator and a manic money spender.
I'm Valerie. I'm a serial entrepreneur and recovering perfectionist. We're here to bring you life and wellness tips, tricks, and hacks from experts
And our personal experiences.
This is the Hot Girls Cry podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Hot Girls Cry podcast.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Let's kick off with some of our gratitudes.
I am grateful for my animals because they are so sweet and they cuddle me at night.
Oh, that is sweet. I'm going to say that I'm grateful for my husband.
Okay, slay.
Yeah, shout out Aiden.
Husband.
He's been a sweet boy and he's been working so hard at his new job and he's doing so well.
Oh, don't you love when they're sweet?
I know. He's just been really, there's been a lot of sweetness.
Oh, we played paintball for the first time. Well, was it your first time too?
Yeah,
Paintball?
I had never played.
Me and Val played paintball? Did paintball? I don't know. We participated in paintball this past weekend.
We participated in the sport of paintballing.
And we played with my boyfriend and her husband, and it was so cute to see them.
It was so fun.
Just in the zone, doing their little boy activities. It was cute.
I saw a TikTok, or he sent me a TikTok that said, when your girlfriends are introducing their boyfriends and the boyfriends are like, hey man, what's up? And the girls in the background are like, oh my God, look how cute they are. Let's go on a family vacation. Let's go get coffee. Oh my God, they're best friends. And Aiden was like, this is you and Shania planning our lives together.
No, seriously. We're plotting for them to have a bromance. We're just pushing them together slowly.
Yeah. And we're bringing up oh, but you both love this. Talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I'm every time Josh says anything about Aiden, I text Val. I'm oh my God, he said he was so cool.
Because boys are so low key. They don't initiate conversation together when they have so much in common.
Yeah, it's true. They both like video games. They both like sports. The cliches.
Yeah. Them two love a dad joke and they're cheesy. But
They do. They are kind of the same type of person. Super silly, loves sports, loves
and that's the problem is they're both really silly behind closed doors, but then when we take them out in public, they're both reserved,
too
and
cool
mature
for school,
and
yeah,
too cool and sophisticated. Like people always tell me they're oh, your husband's so put together and he just means business. I'm are you joking?
You're this guy?
I'm this guy never stops talking, never stops messing around. I'm I mean business. I mean I'm no messing around.
You're excuse me? You'd live with him for a week and then you can see. No, 100%.
Shout out to the boys.
Yeah. They're doing okay.
They are. But today's topic, just to dampen the mood.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're diving into depression and anxiety because this is a very close topic for both of us and it should be talked about more. And we just want to share what our experiences have been like. And we are obviously not professional doctors or therapists, but hopefully it can just shine some light on it and normalize it and maybe just provide some helpful insight for anybody out there.
Just two people who have experiences with these things, kind of sharing what's helped us and our experiences.
Yes, but disclaimer, we are not medical professionals.
Yeah, take everything, with a grain of salt, do your own due diligence, go to your own therapists, all that good stuff.
We are advocates, huge advocates for therapy.
Yeah, I still need to go. I really, really still need to go. It's just one of those things for someone with ADHD, I just never, actually I have went to a therapist and I think that's kind of what.
Yeah, I think you have a little bit of PTSD.
Yeah, I just really didn't like her. And I think just the whole thought of it's not that I didn't like her as a person. I just didn't enjoy her I didn't enjoy her as a therapist. She seemed like a cool person, but just the thought of it's kind of like dating. You kind of have to go out there and find your person you click with and who handles your delicate, deep inner trauma with the type of care that is specific to you and how you need it to be delivered. It's just kind of it's a very daunting task.
That's what I was going to say. It is like dating. It is hard because you kind of have to get like the small talk out of the way.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to see if you vibe with them, but then you're also paying for your time. So you kind of want to like get to the fixes and you're like, okay, let's dive into like my deepest, darkest secrets. And then you kind of have to see like, and like obviously they're professionals and like, but you still want to be receptive to what they're telling you. And like I've been to a handful of therapists in my life and there was one that almost felt dismissive and like I'm sure she didn't mean to.
Yeah, that's how my lady was.
Yeah, and so it's hard because you have to find something that you vibe with, and like I'm just so thankful for my therapist that I've been going to. I started going to her during the pandemic, and I've been going to her consistently every other week for 3 years. And I don't know if y'all have seen that show, The Shrink Next Door with Will Ferrell, but I would do anything for Sarah. I adore her.
I know I need to go to her, but I think it's just one of those things where I've just been procrastinating it so much for some reason. But I really do need to go to her because she sounds so great. By the end of like 2 more years, I'm going to have your hair girl, your lash girl, your nail girl, your financial advisor. Like our lives are we're just going to morph into one person.
We will become one. But honestly, like, I mean, even if you're not struggling with mental health, therapy is huge. Like I truly believe going to therapy is like going to a doctor. Like you should go before an issue arises. It helps you with anything and everything. It can help you with communication, helps you manage your stress. Like, I mean, I go to therapy for my marriage and like, we're not on the verge of a divorce or anything. It just really helps with communication and helps you with like problem solving before a problem even needs to arise.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just so good. And like having a third party be able to like validate your feelings, give you an objective perspective, and just knowing that you have like a professional, like it's obviously everyone vents to their friends and talks to their family and friends.
That's my form of therapy. As soon as I even feel any type of like way about something, I'm like, do.
And that's great. Like it's so great to have a support system, especially someone who knows the people you're talking about too.
Yeah, but y'all are biased.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And we're not professionals. So like, and we have our own, we're not biased and we have our own projections that we're kind of like, there's been times where like, I know I've jumped in on something you've said and then I'm like, ooh, that's my own trauma. I'm letting interfere with my opinions.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I feel like I love that we're moving as a society and it's been very, I don't know, prioritized on social media. It's kind of a trend now that everyone's going to therapy, and I just think it's beautiful to see that it's become so normalized.
Yeah, I love when something like actually beneficial for people becomes trendy, and I'm like, I don't care that it's trendy. Like, let's go for it.
I feel like with so many people on social media now and so many people in the space and talking, I think most things are moving in such a positive direction because the second something is kind of bullshit, everyone chimes in. They're like, no, like, no. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think Gen Z plays a huge part because Gen Z is ready to heal. They're like, we don't want y'all's baggage.
Yeah. Shout out, Gen Z. Please save the planet. Please.
Please.
I'm begging.
For real.
For me, I always was very good mentally up until the pandemic. I feel like, I don't know, blissfully ignorant in my good mental health. Like I didn't even know what kind of it felt like to struggle with anxiety and depression. I've always just been very outgoing, very happy person. And then I had a huge friendship breakup, which I talked about in another podcast. And I was kind of isolated by that, and then isolated by the pandemic, and isolated by living alone all at once. And then the only thing I really had to connect with people was my phone, which also can be so bad for your mental health. So I think all of that combined just kicked off so many things. And I remember the first time I kind of realized that I was having social anxiety was right when the pandemic hit, and I was around a group of people, and I just started like shaking. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is going on? And I was like, okay, I think these people are just like scaring me right now. And then I realized I was having a bit of social anxiety, which is so weird for me because I used to be the type of person that just loved being around people and loved like all of that. But I think the pandemic definitely did a little number on me.
So do you think it's something you always had that kind of came to the surface during then? Or do you think it's something that you kind of, I guess, like acquired?
I want to say it's something that kind of happened to me due to all of the things going on kind of at the same time. It was kind of the perfect storm. I'm sure I had kind of underlying predecessors. Y'all, bless me. I'm always looking for words on these podcasts. Predecessor. You know what I'm saying? Precursors? Precursors.
I know what you're trying to say.
Okay, y'all know what I'm trying to say. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. I was predisposed, probably, because my mom struggles with so many mental health issues. And I think everyone has, like, the ability to have anxiety about something in them. Like, I think that's a very natural human response. And I think we all have the ability to get depressed in the perfect storm kind of circumstances. I don't think anyone is just, like, predisposed to just be happy all the time.
Yeah.
No matter what situation comes at them. But I definitely think it was kind of brought on by all of those things. So it kind of was weird because I never struggled with it before. And I'd always been very happy and very motivated and just all of those things. And then it almost was worse because I was like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? This sucks. Like, why am I not normal?
The awareness almost makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because then you almost like feel it. And then you're like, okay, I feel it, but what do I do now? But if you're in like that blissful ignorance, it's almost like you're just living life and have no idea how you're functioning. And you're just kind of like, whatever, this is normal.
Do you feel like once you've had anxiety and depression, or once you've like felt like that for a bit, that does it ever fully get healed or go away?
I think so, because I think for me, I truly believe I've healed my anxiety.
Oh, that's amazing.
It is. And I think now I had depression. No, I didn't know I had anxiety until the pandemic, not because of the pandemic, but during the pandemic was also closer to when I started my business, and I started to network with a lot of other business owners. And one of my friends who's a business owner is also a therapist, and she specializes in anxiety, perfectionism, and a lot of those similar disorders. And she shared a lot of stuff about high functioning anxiety, and a lot of the content she shared, I'm like, you're calling me out. Like, it identified so closely with me. And I remember messaging her being like, damn, like, you're describing me in my day-to-day life. And she was like, yeah, you probably have high functioning anxiety.
Oh my God, you were literally the poster child, or were the poster child for high functioning anxiety, I think.
And like,
when I first met you.
Yeah. Like, I didn't really see it like that.
Yeah.
Because my whole life, I've always been like type A, overachieving, perfectionist. And that's been like my quirky thing, where it's like, haha, I just talk a lot. Haha, I'm just overachieving. Like, that's just my quirky, like, that's just me.
Yeah.
And like, I've never seen it as unhealthy. And when I started my business, that's when it started to become really taxing and really debilitating for my mental health, because I couldn't stop. Like, obviously when I had jobs, I had people to lean on. I had managers and colleagues. But when I started my business, it was all on me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just all on me because I was building a business, and it was also my livelihood. And so that took a big toll.
A lot.
It was a lot. But I remember she mentioned that. And so then I started therapy, and she was like, yeah, it sounds like you have pretty severe anxiety. And that's when I started to recognize, like, oh, that's what this is. So then I would wake up and I was aware of the anxiety. Like, it was my anxiety waking me up in the morning.
Yeah.
And then I also had such an unhealthy lifestyle with like working nonstop, and like drinking coffee was like my thing. And that obviously just expedited all of it. And so I just had really bad anxiety then. And I like always knew like I was just like a fast talker, and I was just like a hop to it kind of person.
Yeah. You were 100 miles an hour.
All the time.
Yeah.
Everywhere we went.
Yeah.
And like, I look back and I can like now see that like, I don't even remember like conversations I had, because I wasn't even fully present, because I was like 100 miles per hour thinking a million things, bulldozing through conversations. Crazy, because I don't even remember conversations that I used to have, like when I look back on that time period of my life, because I feel like I just bulldozed through them. Like, I was so high anxiety that it was like I wasn't ever fully present, because I was just like thinking about a million things all the time. And like, it's kind of sad, but I'm also like, I wasn't aware. And now I look back and I'm just like, it was just so obvious that I wasn't okay then.
Yeah, definitely. really crazy to see. I think that's been one of the wildest evolutions of anyone I've ever seen, is how you used to function with your anxiety and how you do now, because it really is just two totally different people. Like, there's no other way to even like say it. Y'all are just really two different people. And it's so inspiring because I just saw you recognize it and work through it. And that's one thing that I love about you, is whenever you realize that you need to fix something within yourself, like, you go and do the work. You're on the ball. And I do think ignorance is bliss. Whenever you don't realize that you have something, you're kind of just functioning, and then it's kind of like a hard hit when you realize, okay, wait, I'm not healthy. My brain isn't healthy. But then you really went and did the work, and you got therapy, and you did all these other things. So what is like the main thing? What is like the main thing that you feel like helped you, or a couple of the main things that helped you transform from being super high functioning anxiety to be where you're at now?
I feel like therapy was one of the biggest ones. Like, I feel like that was like 90% of the healing journey, because I feel like it just talking through the way I felt when I had anxiety, because I would have like a list of like situations that I'd come to my therapist with of like, okay, this is what's causing anxiety this week. And I would talk through like why it made me feel that way, like what the feelings were. And I think being able to talk through like all these like feelings that were almost, I don't want to say they were like imaginary, because they're not, but a lot of anxiety comes from things that aren't happening.
Yeah.
Like, I'm anticipating the 15 scenarios that could happen, but only one is going to.
Yeah.
And so being able to work through that with my therapist and change the way I handled and processed situations that typically caused anxiety, like conflict, like work issues, things like that, and being able to process it differently made it such a huge difference. But I also started to become aware of like, I knew that if I was going to continue to run a business, and that was like the biggest cause of my anxiety, I knew that something had to change.
Yeah, like you needed to move the needle forward and getting it healed, or else there wouldn't be much longevity.
I wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I knew I wouldn't make it. And it got to the point where like I was like people pleasing so badly. I was overworking myself so much that like it was so incredibly unhealthy. And I was starting to have like really dark thoughts and like so overwhelmed, and like I was like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
why did I quit my comfortable salary benefits job to hate life?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you have that much pressure on you to like have all, like you said, you have all these other people's livelihood and all these things relying on you to make this business work and this business run. For you to be at that level of anxiety, it's super unhealthy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think the other thing that really helped and really kind of made me recognize all the growth that I had was one of the last times that we went to England. We went for about, I think we went for originally 4 weeks, but we ended up staying for 6 because I got COVID like 2 days before we were supposed to come home. But when we had gone to England, every time we went to England, I would still work from England. But with the time difference, I would work on a different schedule. And so with the time difference, I was just available a bit later. And so I just was able to recognize while there, like, what I do for a living is not that serious. Like, social media, like, yes, it's important to me, and yes, it's valuable. And like, yes, I want my clients to be happy, but like, it's not that serious.
Nothing should ever be so serious to your life that it impacts your mental health that much. Like, at the end of the day, I really think your mental health and your happiness comes before money. It comes before all of these things that we think are such big deals in our life, when at the end of the day, you don't need any of that for your mental health to be good and for you to be happy and all of these things. Like, the happiest places in the world are places that don't have like these people who run these crazy businesses and make these crazy amounts of money. It's like people who are surrounded by people they love and eat good food and get out in nature and all of these other things. So I think we Americans tend to prioritize things that aren't necessarily good for our mental health. And I think that backfires a lot.
Yeah, I think we're deeply ingrained in like hustle culture. And I think being able to literally have an ocean between me and my work put into perspective, like, it's okay. Like, the email can wait. The client can wait. If we don't hit this deadline, no one's gonna die. Like, sure, they might be mad, but like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And like, if a client's unhappy, then like, we can fix it. And if they're still unhappy, then like, that's their problem. So it just really put everything into perspective for me. So I feel like coming home from that trip, I had such a clean slate of like, now I know like everyone can wait. And I also considered like how often I'm waiting on other people or how often other people aren't thinking about me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do I spend my whole day so stressed about accommodating all these other people and being the person that does this and that and like they're on time and this and that. I'm like, no one else is this worried about it. Like, why am I stressing?
Yeah, everyone's so caught up in their own deal, their own thing, that they're not like focused on you and what you're doing and what time you get it done and all of like, we kind of think things like everyone's kind of revolving around us, and especially in your job when so many people do depend on you, I'm sure that's really hard.
Yeah, and I think like that was something that therapy helped me with too, is like I always wanted to be the person who was early. I wanted to be the person who over delivered, and it's like, but why? Like it wasn't
Perfectionism.
Yeah, and like it wasn't for them, it was for me. And it's like I found a lot of validation in being that person, and that's also not healthy. Like I found and still find a lot of validation in my achievements versus my values and like who I am as a person. And so I had to work on that a lot. But I do feel like it almost feels like I woke up one day and like I just didn't have anxiety. And obviously that's not the case. Like obviously it was years of like, what do you call it? Like chiseling away at it. And then it kind of did dissolve, but it does feel like I woke up one day and it was just gone. And I remember having a session with my therapist being like, my brain is so empty because there's not all these anxious thoughts and patterns, and like I'm not going in circles, and I'm just able to send an email and put my foot down, and I'm able to just tell this person no, and it's not a whole 24-hour cycle. And like I just felt so empty that I almost had like an identity crisis.
No, yeah, I remember you did have an identity crisis. You were like, who am I without, I mean, whenever that's who you identify yourself as, I'm sure it's like, okay, who's this new person? Yeah,
I felt really empty, and like that was really scary because then I felt really depressed because I didn't feel, that's when I started to recognize like me being so anxious about like checking my emails and getting to my work literally got me up in the morning. So then I started to sleep in because I didn't feel that urgency. And then I started to feel like crap because I was sleeping in. And then I didn't feel this urgency of like, I've got to get to my meeting. I got to get to the gym. I got to get to this. And like then I genuinely started to feel depressed. And my therapist even said like, I've probably always had depression, which is hereditary. And my mom's always dealt with depression, but my anxiety symptoms masked that so much because they kept me moving. That now
so you don't have time to think about it.
Yeah.
You don't have time to like sit down and recognize it.
Yeah. And so now the depression's much more apparent and the anxiety's in there. And I remember at first I was like, I'll take the anxiety back. Like, this is so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, like we can cope with this too, just like we did with the anxiety. And I was like, like, who am I?
No, I really relate to that. What you said about like, you probably always had it. For me, I think I like to distract myself with like big life changes whenever I start to feel really depressed. I just like, okay, something needs to change. Like, I'm like, over here, I'll be happier. Over in this city, I'll be happier. In this state, I'll be happier. If I do this, I'll be happier. Instead of like actually sitting down and working through and like doing things daily that will help combat the depression. But I remember making a tweet one time that was like, happiness is a choice. And so many people were like on my shit, rightfully so, because they were like, no, it's not. But I genuinely that was coming from a good place. I was like, choose to be happy. But like, I do think there is an element to that that's true. Like, you can try to choose to focus on the happy in some ways. But a lot of times, like, if you're just in it, you're just in it. And no matter how hard you try to like choose to be happy, it's just, if your brain's telling you something different that day, it's just probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we aren't raised to see happiness and sadness in that way, because I did the same thing. Like, I had a friend who, I remember she told me, like, she would be so depressed that she, like, wouldn't even shower for days. And I was like, just get up and shower, you weirdo. Like, I was like, you should just be meditating and, like, doing this and that. And I was like, blah, 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 like, just being snobby. And she was like, you don't get it. And I was like, what do you mean I don't get it? And now I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially with, I think, it's one of those things where you really don't realize until you're in something. But I think with depression specifically, like, you really, even as empaths and people like that, you really cannot empathize with it or understand what someone's going through until you actually have been through it. Because it does, if you haven't really been in it like that, you really just don't see how someone's brain operates in a place where it just is programmed to be sad every day and just, not look for the good in things and not be motivated and stuff like that. We're in such a totally different mindset.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think I've really learned from therapy and from being, like, friends with you and my husband, like, with ADHD and then depression and anxiety, is, like, it's not, like, yes, I was able to, like, heal my anxiety and, like, cope with it and do all these practices and reprogram my brain. And, like, sure, medication probably would have been a much quicker fix. And, like, I would have been totally open to that. And, like, I was able to do it very naturally. And now I'm on antidepressants for the depression because that was a very quick turn of events and that was really hard to cope with. But I do think, like, we don't see these, like, conditions as, like, scientific. Like, I think we see them almost like as choices. Like you said, like, choosing happiness. Like, yeah, we should choose happiness when we can.
We should always try to choose happiness.
But at the same time, like, I remember with, like, ADHD with my husband, like, it would really frustrate me because I'm like, just try to remember, like, just try to make lists. But, like, it is genuinely how someone's brain is programmed. It is, like, the actual, like, scientific way their brain is designed. And it's not a matter of thinking. Like, it's literally their genetic makeup. And that's one thing, like, that was really hard for me to swallow because I'm, as a control freak, I wanted to be like, no, like, I can change it. But it's like, no, like, that's how someone is made. Like, and, like, yes, there's ways to fix it. There's ways to cope with it and, like, get through it. But, like, it's not, I think for me, it was really hard to accept the anxiety and the depression because I was like, no, like, I'm so happy. And I almost felt guilty because I was like,
yeah, you do feel guilty.
Yeah, because I'm like, who am I to be depressed? Like, look at my life, you know?
Especially whenever you felt a feeling that's not like that, which for me was my whole life. When I started feeling like that, I felt guilty because I was like, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. I've always been happy. I'm losing myself. Like, there's just this whole other element whenever you've been the type of person who's not like that and you just feel like you're never going to be able to get back to who you were whenever you didn't feel that.
Yeah, and not to, like, diagnose you, but, like, when you look at the childhood that you came from, like, there's so many elements that would cause anxiety and, like, things like that. And it's like, but then it's not always the reason someone is the way they are. Yeah. And I think we oftentimes, like, almost gaslight ourselves because, like, with me and my depression, I'm like, how dare I be depressed? Like, I come from a middle-class family. I lived in the suburbs. I went to private school. How dare I? But it's like, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. And I think it's a product of our environment and our genetic makeup, our daily habits, who we have around us, the most recent trauma and how we've internalized it. Like, there's so many elements that go into it besides just, like, what was your childhood like growing up? Because my childhood was a shit show and I was Gucci for a long time mentally. I was chilling. I was determined to make it out of there. I was motivated, all of that. And I don't know if it was probably just, like, me maybe masking that by me, like, constantly making these big life changes throughout all my life. Like, I moved out when I was 17 and started hopping around ever since, but I never really felt depression until the isolation part of it came in. And now I'm still dealing with it, but I do feel like there's been I feel like finally this past year, I've at least had breaks from it and had periods where I didn't feel it. And that's been the part of it for me that's just like, okay, is this something I'm always going to deal with? Because it always kind of creeps back in a little bit, here and there, and you're like, is it back? Am I okay? Like, no, don't do this. I was just so good. But I really think there's things that you can do to just prep your brain to be able to have the space to feel happier and give it a break from like dopamine and, you know, do things that are just really healthy for your brain so it has the possibility to have like a happy day.
What are some of the things that you do? Because I do feel like it's almost, we've talked about this, where almost like once you acknowledge it, it like makes its presence known. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that can be part of it too, is like maybe there were times in the past where you experienced it, but you just didn't quite know that you were experiencing it. But now like, you know, and so it's like, you know.
Yeah. For me, I always start to feel happier whenever I have dopamine breaks, and Andrew Huberman talks about this a lot on his podcast. I would really definitely go listen to that podcast, you guys. It's so good. And I feel like we kind of indulge in social media in this way that has no negative effects on our mental health or anything like that. But dopamine is so real, and we get so much dopamine from our phones, which can suck all of the dopamine out of us. So we can't feel it unless we're like on our phones. And for me, it's really, really hard, especially because I do live alone. And it's like I don't have anything kind of taking my energy away. I have to be very mindful of just being stoic or just in the moment whenever I'm just eating or just, you know, savoring every moment instead of trying to fill it with all of this mindless information that I can consume. And I feel like we have a tendency to write it off as work too. But just being really mindful about the phone. I try not to get on it in the morning, and then I try to take maybe 2 hours in the morning, and then this is not every day, y'all. Like a lot of days I end up getting on it all freaking day, and it's not good, and I definitely can tell a difference. And then at night I try to stay off of it 3-4 hours if I can. That's the dream. My dream would be to be on social media 5 hours a day. And I feel like that is so crazy to even say. 5 hours a day is the goal.
When you think about it, that's so much. But then when you think about how much we're actually spending on it, it's so much more.
Yeah. And
I think my average is 8 hours, but it's also work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. A lot of it is work, but then there's a lot of time where I'm just, scrolling TikTok while I'm eating and just doing all of these things. That's a major thing for me, is I can really feel myself level out and start to get my mind just back together whenever I make sure I'm just mindful about the phone time and all of that. I think another thing for me is taking time to just do things that make my brain feel really good, like dancing or doing an activity like that makes my brain work and think and do something where I have to really be in the moment. And me personally, I really like to read science fiction. Is it science fiction? Fiction. I really like to read fiction. So that kind of gets my brain out of it and gets my brain working in a really positive way. So just making time for things in your day, whether it be working out or yoga or something like that really gives your brain a break in a good way to still work at the same time, but just healthy things that you can do for your brain and implementing those habits daily for me. Another thing that's really helped is, this is not going to be for everyone, but shrooms and microdosing with shrooms really, really helped me. I think it really gave me a push in such a good direction and kind of just allowed me to really open up and put my ego aside and see just the beauty in the world and how much I did love my life. And shrooms affect so many people differently. So take that with a grain of salt. It's not going to be for everyone. Listen to your gut. Might not be for you, but for me, whenever I was microdosing, it definitely kind of just gave me a major push in the right direction.
Love that.
Yeah. It's a lot of tips, but honestly, I have to make it a point to just do things that I know is going to make my brain happier, or else I'm going to be, I already know when I'm not doing all those things, I will wake up and I'll just start feeling so unmotivated and just sluggish and just dreading the day and just stuff like that. And I'll just feel just down. But it's really, the science is there behind all of it. We can't just be doing all of these bad things for our brain, isolating ourselves and not talking to anyone, not connecting with people, not getting physical touch. You need 8 hugs a day in order to be at your optimum affection levels or something like that. Your body genuinely craves 8 hugs a day, and you probably get 1, Val.
If that. I'm so deprived in that regard. I'm just not an affectionate person.
Yeah, I'm gonna start hugging you 8 times a day.
I probably get my most hugs from you, because I feel we always hug when we see each other and leave each other. Yeah. And I don't hug anybody else. I hug my husband like once a day, maybe.
Wow. I'm a very, very huggy person, especially with my partner. I'm
I
like
don't even hug my
literally
parents.
laying on top of him all day. Really? Yes, that's just like how you grew up in your family. Like y'all didn't really show affection.
Yeah, I'm like not a lovey-dovey person. Yeah, I think a lot of like the tips that you're saying too come from self-awareness and like knowing what makes you feel good and knowing what doesn't. I think we get caught up in a lot of habits that just everyone does without recognizing like how they actually make us feel.
Yeah, like I've tried journaling and everyone says that's like the number one thing, and that never really sticks for me. I'll like pick it up here and there, but while I'm journaling, I just never really, it doesn't really, and I'm talking about journaling in terms of like actually writing out your feelings. Like that really doesn't work for me, but it might be someone else's jam, you know, the thing that makes them feel the absolute best. So it is definitely everyone else's individual journey, whether it be meditation or, which I also do, which also helps. But just finding what makes you feel good and making it a priority to do those things, because it's really easy to slip into bad habits.
For sure.
Yeah. Is there any major like things for you that are helping you with your depression that you're dealing with? Is it, I know you mentioned you're on Lexapro?
Zoloft.
Zoloft. Yeah. I know you mentioned that in therapy.
Yeah, I feel like I've had to kind of deal with anxiety and depression as like two separate categories because I kind of got them at two separate times. So I feel like with anxiety, doing breath work really helped me. There's a YouTube video that I love that does like a 10-minute guided breath work session. And I feel like that really just helped like bring you back to zero. And I was doing that like every morning for a while. And I think that just also helps you recognize like your body in general and like that we just don't breathe, like truly breathe enough. And so I think like when anxiety would spike, it would just kind of be like that reminder of like, okay, let's just take a breath. So that did a lot for me. And then it just, you know, kind of being aware of like my caffeine levels, which sucked because I love my caffeine. And then therapy obviously did wonders for me with my anxiety. But with depression, that came on so quickly. And I also felt like the peak of my depression come on quickly, like at the beginning of fall. So it also came on like when it started to get a lot darker, a lot earlier. And so that was really hard. So we just kind of immediately went into medication for that because I was having like really dark thoughts. And like it was just a very different thing to deal with than my anxiety, and it was affecting me a lot differently and like my relationship. And so I immediately got on antidepressants for that, and that at first kind of made me feel like I kind of felt like a cop-out. I almost felt like, well, I was able to heal my anxiety, like why can't I work through my depression? But again, like I had to come to terms with like it's just how my brain is wired. And the antidepressants were such a huge help. But also going to the gym in the morning, like I do love going to the gym, and like going at all makes a big difference. But I find that the days that I go to the gym in the morning makes such a big difference in my mood for the whole day. And so rather than going necessarily, like I'll still go at night if I need to go at night, like I try to get it in, but when I go in the morning, it makes such a big difference. Like
I feel that.
Those are the, like yesterday I went at 5:45 and my whole day I was like, I'm on top of the world. I'm so superior to everyone.
There needs to be a study of like how people feel when they wake up before everyone else, because it's
a superiority complex, I swear. Like you wake up and you're like, these freaking peasants, like oh, you're up at
slackers.
7, you loser. Like, and then today I get up at 8 because I was so tired from getting up at 5:45 yesterday. But yeah, so that made a really big difference for me. But I think just, yeah, like you said, like finding things that really work for you and then being aware of your symptoms, and that way when something starts to show up, you can recognize it. Because like I said, like I had no idea I had anxiety for years, and I look back and I'm like, no one wanted to tell me.
I think it's hard for other people too, because we all struggle with our own anxiety. So we're like, I don't know whether or not.
Imagine someone told
that's
me.
Her. Yeah. Oh my God, that would send you into a spiral.
I'd be like, what are you talking about? I just love how my therapist friend was like, yeah, you definitely have this. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, no, I think you found out perfectly. I was like,
just on
the
Instagram.
the universe was giving it to you in your own way.
Yeah,
you
Instagram
needed to
diagnosed me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Social media is such a great tool, but it can
Blessing and a curse.
Yeah, a blessing and a curse.
I remember
double-edged sword.
I saved the post, and at my next therapy session, I was like, so I came across this post, and I like read it to her, and she was like, yeah.
She's like, that's you, babes.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's everything. This is definitely a loaded episode. Make sure to take care of yourself, babe.
And #therapyiscool.
Thanks for listening to the Hot Girls Cry podcast.
If you've enjoyed this episode, show some love and support with a rating and review.
Or keep the conversation going over on our socials.
TTYL!